All right, welcome to McKeen's Hockey on YouTube, a special edition show. We have a mock draft for the top 16 lottery picks in NHL, and I am joined by Brock Otten, Derek Newmeyer, and Kyle Watson. Hello, gents. How's it going?
Excellent, Mark. I think this is a great idea. It should be fun.
Yeah, you guys ready for some mock action here? There's been a lot out there, so we thought for sure we had to add it to the McKeen's site. So let's get at it. So yeah, we got 16 picks for each, obviously. It's going to be a lot of fun. And based on a randomization, Brock, you are the lucky first pick, and you get to choose for the New York Islanders. This has been a hot topic of conversation as to who they're going to go with first overall.
Yeah, it has been a hot topic. I mean, do they keep the pick? Do they trade the pick? We've got a new general manager in town. How do they put their stamp on the team? Do they take the local boy who could be a star for the team? I'm taking Matthew Schaefer. I think that he's the best player available in this draft. You look at the Islanders locking up Ilya Sorokin long term. It just makes sense to then build out the defense that's going to play in front of him, especially with rumors that Noah Dobson could potentially be on the move, right? You need to have a franchise defender in place there if you've got your goaltender locked up. And Schaefer is a potential all situations type, one of the best skaters in the draft, one of the smartest players in the draft, a guy that has continued to elevate his play. And I think that's incredibly impressive because he just keeps getting better and better no matter the situation. Yes, he missed a lot of this year to that collarbone injury that he picked up at the World Juniors, but that's a fluke injury. That shouldn't affect his long-term development or projection. I don't think he's in the NHL next year. I think he's going to need another year in the OHL or in a development league before he's ready to make that jump, just because of how much time he missed this year. But this is somebody that we're extremely high on at McKeen's, somebody that I think can be one of the NHL's best defenders.
I don't think there's a problem with anyone going with Matthew Schaefer first overall for sure. All right, so then I am the second on board here. And I think that in terms of tiers, there's probably two players right at the top, Matthew Schaefer and Mr. Michael Misa. And, what can you say about Michael Misa? Had himself a heck of a year in Saginaw, 134 points in 65 games. And what he brings to the table is just a combination of skill, speed, good compete. And, I've had the privilege of watching him for 2 years now, and there's been a nice development in his play overall. And, going from last year playing on the wing and this year heading into the center position, I found that he transitioned really well. And, San Jose has a lot of depth up the middle, but I mean, a lot of great teams in the past have had that 1C, 2C combo. And I think that it would bode well for San Jose to go with someone like Michael Misa, given that Schaefer is not available. I think that they'd probably go Schaefer if they had that first pick. However, and, Dickinson's looking good for San Jose, had a great Memorial Cup. So, yeah, I think that they go with Michael Misa, like I said, 1, 2 kind of tier players at the top of this draft for sure. All right, moving on to number 3. We got Derek. Derek, Chicago Blackhawks. Who are they going to take with that third overall pick?
Well, there are some different players who would be good options here, but I'm going to go for a little bit of a fit pick on this one. I'm going to go with Porter Martone. I just think that he is kind of what they're looking for in their system right now. They've got Connor Bedard as their number 1 center. They got Artyom Levshunov last year, 2nd overall. Martone brings some size. He brings some power elements to his game. He's the type of player that you could kind of comfortably pencil in on the wing with Connor Bedard as a guy who could complement his strengths, maybe overcome some of his weaknesses. And I think that Martone's leadership is also going to be valuable to the Hawks in this position, because you look at the weight that Bedard is carrying right now on that team, and it's a lot. The expectations are high. That's a very demanding market. And you can see it's wearing Bedard down a little bit. If you had someone else that had some of those leadership elements, a guy with a really proven track record, I think that would be a good fit for them there. And I mean, the argument could certainly be made as well that Martone is the 3rd best player available in this draft. I mean, there are some others who could also stake claims to that, but this wouldn't be a reach for the Hawks. So I think they're getting a player who could be the 3rd best player out of this class, but also someone who is a really, really good fit for what they're looking for.
I like Martone a lot too. Got to see him a lot this year, and really good player. All right, Kyle, you're on the clock. Utah at number 4. Who are they going with?
I think the first pick in Utah Mammoth history, since the name change, will be James Haggins. I think a lot of people are slotting Porter Martone at this pick, hoping he falls, but just because I think it'd be a natural fit with the way Utah's drafted lately for size. But this is high enough in the draft that I don't think you're worried about positional need. I think Haggins is the clear best player available here. I think some of the concerns about his inability to, drive to the middle have been overstated. You can talk a lot about his line mates and them doing that work for him, but I think he does have the tenacity while he might not have the physicality to play up the middle. And I'm not forgetting the 2 years he had before going to college. I don't think this was necessarily a bad freshman campaign. I think it was a very solid campaign, especially when you consider the role and the importance he played for Team USA at the World Juniors this year. It didn't blow everyone away like Celebrini or Fantilli, but I think maybe we were just getting our expectations up too high for Haggins. So I still see lots of skill here, high-end playmaking, and a very, very solid base to work with. I think that people will look at Logan Cooley maybe and see a similar player there, but I don't see that as a problem at all. I think Logan Cooley, James Haggins could be an incredible 1-2 punch, and that's who I think the Mammoth end up taking.
All right. Brock, 5th overall, Nashville.
Yeah, so for Nashville, I think that this is an organization that is badly in need of a playmaker, somebody that can elevate the play of wingers that are in the organization right now. I think realistically, Nashville's probably hoping that James Haggins falls to number 5. But with the players that are available, based on our mock, I see them going with Caleb Desnoyers. I think that this is a player who plays a very mature game, who can move through their system fairly quickly, hopefully, is one of the better playmakers in the draft, one of the better potential two-way centers available in the draft. This is a potential complete package who could slot in as a number 1 or number 2 center for them in the future. Kind of complements a lot of the players that they have in their system really well. And I think that, this ends up being a really good pick for Nashville in sort of the vein of some of the players that they had when the Predators were one of the best organizations in the NHL. They had a lot of players that played the game hard like Desnoyers did. That was sort of their identity, and I think they kind of need to get back to that.
Yeah, you know what? I'm a big fan of Desnoyers. Liked his game. He was hurt during the Mem Cup, but looked pretty good in his last game there. Thought he showed some jam. So, all right, we are at myself now, the Philadelphia Flyers, and you left me with kind of a tough one here, but I'm going to go. He's kind of dropped a little bit in some of the rankings I've noticed, but I think the Flyers need some size in their lineup to go along with Mishkov, and I'm going to go with Anton Frondel. I know that the hype's kind of dropped a little bit with him, especially he wasn't really too stand out-ish, I guess, at the U18s, and I think that based on his play at the U18s, but you got to remember he played in the men's league, played a lot of playoff hockey, and had to fly over to Texas and whatnot. But I think that one of the best shots in this draft, and there was some smart play. I saw at the U18s, I saw some things that he was doing in terms of hockey IQ that I thought would bode well NHL wise. And he's already a big player. They got him listed I think at 6'1". He could be pushing 6'2" probably. And once he fills in, I think he still has some room to grow in terms of strength and maturity and whatnot. I think that the Flyers can't go wrong with a player like Frondel, and they tend to like their Swedes in Philadelphia too. So I think that's a good fit for the Flyers at number 6.
I'm interested what everyone made of his U18s, because he was kind of rising back up draft boards after being at the very top at the start of the year. And then I know, he was maybe the 5th or 6th best player on the team, but I think everyone's kind of saying he was pretty worn out at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think, Brock?
I think it's a fair criticism. I think that we definitely had some high expectations for Frondel, and you look at, say, Team Sweden, and it was a guy like Philip Ekberg who kind of came out of nowhere essentially to be the offensive leader of that team. Some of the more higher profiled offensive players were inconsistent. But I kind of see what Mark's saying. Like yes, the production wasn't terrific, but I thought that Frondell showed a lot of components to his game that I thought would translate incredibly well to the pro level. And the draft is all about projection, right? We're looking at projecting players to fill a role at the NHL. I think Frondell's mature game that's built around quick decisions and physicality, I think is going to play well. I think that he's going to end up finding a really solid role with whatever team drafts him. Maybe it's not as a first line guy. It might be more of like a second line, all situations kind of guy. But you also have to look at the fact that he's going to continue to develop offensively as well. And I think he's shown previously that he does have skill, that he does think the game at a high level as an offensive distributor, that he does have that big shot. There's a lot of different things that, could improve, but there's a chance that they do. And then his projection is going to improve.
Now at what are we at here? Boston, number 7, Derek. Who the Bruins going to take?
Well, the Bruins need help in a lot of different areas, but when you look at what they do have right now, it is a little heavy on forward. So I think they need defense more than anything else. So I'm going to go with Jackson Smith here from the Tri-City Americans. Now, there are a lot of players in this tier who could be the right pick here. So the Bruins go with a little bit of a need, but you've got a guy who's got tremendous upside. Fantastic skater, one of the best pure skaters in this draft class. He's got size, he's got reach. He's exceptionally athletic. He's got a lot of puck skill that more than people realize. I mean, he can make some really high-end plays at full speed. There's just so much to like about his game. There's so many different tools. And right now he does have some issues with his decision-making and his awareness. There are certainly some things that he'll need to clean up. But if you just look at pure upside, I mean, this is a guy that is – you can say his upside is among the highest in this entire draft class. And for a defenseman like this, he's going to be a guy who can eat a lot of minutes. He's going to be a guy who can play in different situations. He's got a heaviness and a hardness to his game at times as well, which should play well with the Bruins organization. So I think this pick just makes a lot of sense for Boston to go with Jackson Smith.
Love it. Yeah, you know what? Jackson Smith, he's a fun one to watch. Especially his time in Tri-City, like his rushes were pretty amazing. Lots of fun clips watching him rush a puck up the ice for sure. His
highlight reel is pound for pound just as good as any other defenseman in this draft class.
Absolutely, and like you said, the way he skates, like for 6'3" defenseman, great skater.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Kyle, you're on the clock. We got who do we got here? Seattle, right? Yep.
So I think the Kraken are still at the point where they're kind of drafting best player available. I think that's kind of been their philosophy. They've done a good job of blending skill with, I don't want to call it grit, but tenacity. And I think Victor Eklund is a natural fit for them. Victor Eklund is one of my favorite players in the class just to watch. I think he's got a really nice pop to his shot. He's a good playmaker in terms of how he facilitates puck movement, I would say. He's a lot like his brother with just how effective he is at the boards, getting the puck in tight areas to his teammates. Was on that team with Frondell, got promoted to the SHL for Djurgården, and I think he'll probably spend another year there. And I think he's just a player that can fit wear many hats for you. I think that his offensive toolkit and strong skating ability mean that he could play up and down a lineup. And I think that he is probably one of the most skilled on-puck players in this draft. And, they've got a lot of talent in Seattle, but I still think they're not exactly sure what their lineup's going to look like in 3-4 years. But I think Victor Eklund is one of the easiest players in this draft to see in the NHL in a year or two, just because of how fleshed out his game is and how responsible of a player he is.
And with centers like Shane Wright and Matty Beniers and Berkeley Catton, they're going to need some talented wingers to play with those guys as well.
And I think it's interesting that, you've got them taking a forward. And I feel like when we're doing mock drafts, I see a lot of them. I've participated in a lot of them. where we just keep mocking a defenseman to Seattle in the first round, and they keep saying, no, we're just going to keep taking forwards. It's just one of those things that you normally see, a franchise, an expansion franchise, take a defenseman fairly early to try to build out their blue line. And Seattle has yet to do that. So I just find it very, very interesting.
Well, to be transparent, once Smith was off the board, I just think that it wasn't much of a debate. I think Eklund, for me, has to be gone by that spot. So I definitely thought about, guys like Radim Mertka, Keishon Aitchison. But, yeah, I think we'll have to wait another year or two, perhaps, for Seattle to get their guy on the blue line.
Love it. All right, Brock, you ready for your pick?
Yeah, number 9, Buffalo Sabres. I'm going with Brady Martin of the Sioux Greyhounds, and I just like the fit here. I think Buffalo is a team that's kind of trapped in the middle ground. They need somebody that's going to help them get over that hump to become a playoff team. They need somebody who is a warrior, who's going to go through the wall to make plays. I think back to a guy like Mike Pekka, right? And I think that's best case scenario for Brady Martin, right? Somebody that can be a leader, somebody that can play in any situation, somebody that can make big plays when it counts, can help this Buffalo Sabres team finally get over the hump and make the playoffs and take that next step as a franchise. He's probably not going to be the team's first line center moving forward, but in the playoffs, he could be the team's best player, and he could be the guy that helps them get there. And I think that his skill level is underrated. I think we saw that at the U18s where he was Canada's really, or at least one of Canada's primary play drivers in helping them achieve success. He's an all situations type, at least projection wise. He can kill penalties. He can play the power play. He can play the half wall. He can play the net front. The skating has improved a ton in the last 2 years. I think it continues to get better. Just a workmanlike mentality. I think this is the type of player that Buffalo needs to start focusing on, because you look at their past drafts and there's a pattern there. There's a similar type of player, the cerebral type, but not the hard type. And I think they need to start looking at players who bring a little bit more physical intensity. And I think that's Martin.
Yeah, that team needs a spark. A little bit of extra grit, a little bit of extra character, and that's Martin's game to a T.
Yeah, that'd be a great pickup for sure for Buffalo. All right, number 10, Anaheim. Well, you know what? I don't think I can let this player slide any further than is right now. So I'm going to go with a big D that would help him on the blue line, and that's Radim Mertka. Right shot D, had 35 points in 43 games. I don't think that's indicative of his skill. I don't see him as an offensive defenseman, but I think that in Seattle he was kind of allowed to do a lot. They needed some defensive help, I guess, and so he provided it, and he did pretty well. But I mean, when he was playing in Czechia in the men's league, wasn't didn't put up the numbers there. So that the transition was nice to see in Seattle. But I just think that Anaheim could use a big mobile right D. And if Mertka slides to number 10, I can't see them passing on him, given that, who's left over right now in terms of prospects to pick from. So, yeah, I think I'm going to go with Radim Mertka to Anaheim at number 10. That'd be a nice pickup for them for sure.
They love that kind of player there.
Yeah. I mean, you got Minchikov and Zellweger and stuff like that. So I think that he'd fit nice in that system. All right. Who do we got next? Derek, you're up now. Who do you see Pittsburgh taking at number 11?
There's a lot of interesting options here. It gets kind of tricky. The Penguins are looking for someone who can be a really important prospect for them, because they're just about to embark upon a rebuild or a retool or whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to go with Jake O'Brien here. I mean, you've got a guy that, if he hits, could be a first-line center or at least a second-line center at the NHL level. He's a tremendous playmaker, tremendous puck handler, excellent offensive vision. I mean, when the puck is on his stick in the offensive zone, there are few players that can match him, which was evidenced by the scoring he put up this season. He was very, very high up the scoring charts in the OHL. as a playmaking center, real power play specialist. There are things to his game that needs to work on. His skating could be a little clunky at times. His pace can be a little lackluster. He's kind of a string bean out there. He certainly needs to add a lot of muscle and work on his conditioning. But those are things that could come in time. And I mean, when you look at the type of things that O'Brien needs to work on in his game, I don't know if there's someone who could be a better influence for him in that area, in those areas, than someone like Sidney Crosby. I mean, Crosby's got a few more years left with the Penguins, I would assume. So I think he'd be a great influence for a player like O'Brien. I think he'd be able to help O'Brien get the most out of his game and work on some of his weaknesses. So I think this just makes a lot of sense for the Penguins. You've got a player who could, he plays center, which is an important position. There's a player who could be a star at the NHL level, like a real top of the lineup player. So I think O'Brien to the Penguins just makes a lot of sense here.
Now, the New York Rangers have the 12th overall pick, but there's potential that it might move to Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh would go back to back here, but let's say that it is New York. What do you think they're going to do with that pick, Kyle?
I think if they do decide to keep the pick, they won't be looking they'll be looking at a player with a little bit of a shorter development path, and that's why I have them picking Keyshawn Aitchison here. The other player I was considering was Roger McKeen, but I think he maybe has one of the longest development paths just with his injury history. So Keyshawn Aitchison is a player that brings so much energy. You could call it dog per 60. His compete level is off the charts. He loves to put on a show, big hits. You talk about all the intangibles that come up playoff time, and I think Keyshawn Aitchison brings a lot of those. I have always kind of underrated his offensive game, and I think we saw that take a big jump this season in Barrie. They have a lot of other defensemen capable of moving the puck, but I thought at almost all times Keyshawn Aitchison was their best defender, stepping up to score a lot of important goals too, which really impressed me. But the main thing with his game is just his ability to play shutdown defense, not give any of your star forwards any room to play with, and just scare them. Honestly, he's one of the best hitters in this draft, behind Brady Martin, I would say. And I think that he, in a year or two, can step into this organization and help them win a cup, because at the end of the day, I think the Rangers do not want to be drafting here. If they end up drafting here, I think this is the kind of profile of player they'd be looking for.
All right, Keyshawn Aitchison to the Rangers at number 12. All right, Brock, back to you. The last 4 picks, we got Detroit.
I'm not going to lie. I didn't think anybody would take Aitchison, and that's who I was thinking Detroit would have their eyes on. Detroit is a team that's just had a type the last few years. They want hard workers. They want players who play with grit. They want players who, bring physicality. And Aitchison is that, right? They moved Andrew Gibson in a trade. Brady Cleveland hasn't really developed the way that they probably had hoped he would when they drafted him pretty early in the second. That was the guy that I was thinking, man, this would be a perfect fit in Detroit to try to kind of get them over the hump, similar to, like I said, with Buffalo, right? Like, this is a team that needs players like that. But they have been drafting them a lot, and I think there's one player on the board that really jumps out, and that's Roger McKeen. I think Detroit's sort of in a position where they can take a chance on a guy like McKeen, because if he hits, he is that kind of player, that difference maker who can bring, a power game to the ice for the Wings and give them sort of an element down the middle that they don't really currently have, right? And I think that, yes, there is risk. We don't know necessarily what's happening with his back. We saw what happened with Caitlin Lindstrom this year and barely playing. That is the risk. He is telling teams at the combine that this is an issue that he's seen doctors about. The doctors have said is fixable, and he's going to be able to progress and move on with his hockey career. So that's encouraging. Teams are going to do a ton of due diligence at the combine. They're going to probably look at their own medical evaluations of McKeen, and I think that if everything comes back okay, if McKeen is still available for Detroit at 13, I think this is sort of a no-brainer for them. I think, as I said, this is a potential number 1 or number 2 center who can sort of help anchor a power play unit, playing a variety of different roles for his team. It can be somebody who really helps Detroit take that next step in a way that maybe some of their current forward prospects maybe don't really have the potential to do. You look at some of their younger rostered NHL forwards as well, and I don't know if any of them have the upside of a McQueen. And I think they're in a position where they can take a chance on a guy that maybe, you're concerned about a variety of different things, be it consistency, be it the injury history. But I think this makes sense.
They need a prospect who can be a superstar for them. And McQueen could be that player if he can stay healthy.
All right. Roger McQueen to the Red Wings at number 13. You stole my pick there, Brock.
Everybody's just stealing everybody's pick at this point. Hey, that's a good mock draft.
Yeah, that's not bad at all. Here, let me, I'm just going to, all right. So I'm up Columbus, number 14, right? Yeah, 14. Columbus at 14. We're going to go with, I just mentioned him, Lyndon Lakovic, Moose Jaw Warrior. And here's a player I think that has some more runway to grow literally into his body. I think he's a little awkward. They said that he's grown like 5 inches since his WHL draft. So you can kind of see that awkwardness at times with Lakovic. And I just like some of the upside. Like, he's a big kid, right? 6'4". He's got, good strength. He's not the most physical player, though. He doesn't leverage that size to his advantage sometimes. But I think that if he figures that out, he's going to be a player who's going to be hard to stop in the NHL level. And he's got to work a little bit on his skating. Like I said, you see like some awkwardness. I think that with those growing pains that, some players just haven't caught up to their body yet. And I think that's what Lyndon Lakovic has. But in terms of like skill set and, shot and hands and all that kind of stuff, he's a really good player. And, I can't see him falling out of the top 20, but you never know. I mean, you see some mocks, him dropping a bit, but I like him. I could see him doing some nice things in Columbus with the youth push that they have there.
Yeah, I think he'd be a really good fit for the Blue Jackets. I mean, they're not going to be in any kind of rush to bring him up to the pro team. They've got a pretty good prospect pipeline right now. He's a guy who still needs to kind of take more ownership of his game, but all the tools are there. The raw talent is there. Columbus isn't, one of the more intense markets to play in, so he'll have time and not as much pressure to kind of get the most out of his development. So I think Columbus could be rewarded pretty well with a player like him. He's very talented.
So that brings us actually to you now, Derek. You got the Vancouver Canucks at number 15. What are those Knuckers going to do?
Well, speaking of intense markets, Vancouver is certainly that. And they keep stepping on rakes in recent years, it seems like. So I think you need a player that can kind of handle that pressure, whether that's a forward or defenseman. I think they need someone who's talented, but also has a really strong mental game and a strong mental approach. So I'm going to go with Cullen Potter here, actually. He's one of my personal favorites in this draft class. He's a little on the smaller side, but man, he's got almost everything else in his game. He's a tremendous skater, plays at a blistering pace, very, very smart. He's laser focused. I mean, just the decisions he makes, the awareness he has, he's just so sharp in all 3 zones. He works just as hard defensively as he does offensively. He's a great puck handler. He's a deceptively good shooter, including with his one-timer. I mean, this is a guy who's one of the only 2 2007-born players in the NCAA at the start of this year. Will Horkoff joined eventually as the third. But, I mean, this guy was playing as a true underager at the NCAA level all season, and he looked really good. He was playing center a lot of the time. He was killing penalties at times. Like, just a very mature player, very well coached. I think he's got a lot of pro details in his game already. Yeah, I'm not normally a scout who trusts the smaller players as much, but with Potter, there's just so much to his game to like. And I think he's going to have the right kind of mental makeup to handle what's going on in Vancouver and be a really solid, really reliable player for them, and someone who can drown out a lot of the noise when he needs to.
And he's already got that NHL style skating. Like, the kid can just wheel around the ice, no problem. Fantastic skater.
Yeah, he can be an exciting player too, which the Canucks fans would really love.
All right, Kyle, you get the last pick in the lottery numbers. Number 16, Montreal, Les Habitants. Who are they going to go with?
Well, they have 2 picks here back to back. So although we'll only be doing the top 16 today, I think it's important to consider, they will be considering that in their thinking here. I think it'll be hard for them to look past Justin Carbonneau, without even talking about their desire to draft French Canadians. Just a highly skilled player. I think he broke the 45 goal mark this year in the queue. For me, the clear best player coming out of Quebec behind Caleb Desnoyers. I think he brings so much to the table in terms of his offensive toolkit. You're not going to have to worry much about developing skill-wise or his shot, his playmaking ability, on-puck skills, his ability to manipulate defenders on the rush and within the zone. I think, the concerns mostly come from the defensive side of the game, and I think that's something that a lot of players have to work with at this age, and I don't see there being any major obstacles in his way in his development. And I think it's a really nice natural fit, a highly skilled guy that I think will fit with any of the centers in that Canadiens lineup, and also can keep up with guys like Demidov and Cole Caulfield. So from the Armada, I see the Montreal Canadiens taking Justin Carbonneau.
I think that'd be a pretty awesome fit, eh? Like you said, homegrown Montreal boy, or Blainville Boisbriand there. Yeah, it's a pretty nice fit for sure. And then if they got the 2 picks, do you think that there's any potential for them to trade one of those, or do a package deal to move up? Like, they got some options here with going 16 and 17 overall.
There's a few teams, and not just to speak on Montreal here with 16 and 17, but there's a few teams that have a lot of picks in the top 40, 45 this year. That we could see a lot of movement, especially, the way that this draft is sort of being viewed as tiered into a top 20, top 22. You can see teams trying to break into that. You can see teams trying to move up to make sure they get their guy, because maybe they just don't really like anybody else a lot. So I really do think we could see a lot of movement, and it could be Montreal there packaging, say, 16 and 17 to move up into, the top 10, moving out one of those picks for an already capable NHL player who can sort of fill out their roster. I think there's a lot of different routes that Montreal could take here, and different teams as well.
Yeah, I wonder if with 2 picks here, yes, very good possibility to look at trading. I think a lot of teams are especially the ones that aren't there yet in the terms of able to make championship runs are looking at next year's draft. Another possibility would be looking at some of the centers. I mean, if they want to trade up to get a center they really like, whether it's O'Brien or Martin or Desnoyers, or there's still guys like Coots, Kindle, Reshny on the board here, and 10 years later, I still think we're talking about needing center help with Nick Suzuki in Montreal. So, I'm really interested to see what they do, because I think next year's draft is incredible, but I think the pressure's sort of on Montreal, or at least they're getting ready. The fans are getting ready to start, playing playoff hockey again. So I don't know if they're looking to make a more conservative or a liberal approach to the draft this year.
To piggyback on what Brock said a minute ago, this isn't the strongest class overall, but one of the areas where it's pretty good is there's a lot of different kinds of players who bring different kinds of elements. So if there are teams that really need something specific, whether it's, say, an offensive defenseman or a shutdown center or what have you, there's a lot of good variety in this draft class, especially in the first round. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is a lot of movement, just for teams to be able to get the kind of player that they are looking for or really need in their system.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think that mocking is a very fun exercise, and it's easy. It's fun to look at sort of organizational needs, type of players this organization or general manager has drafted in the past. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of this stuff's kept really close to the chest, and we're going to see. I think we're going to see someone kind of break the order, and like Derek said, there's some certain roles and certain players that excel at very specific areas of the game that people are going to jump for, or snatch off a little earlier than maybe they're perhaps anticipated to be drafted.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of trades in the first round. I think that because there's a lot of teams that have multiple picks, the Flyers, Columbus, who else? Montreal,
Nashville, San
Nashville,
Jose.
yeah. So there,
Calgary might have
this could be a wild first round. I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see.
Can't wait.
All right, boys. So that's it for McKeen's mock draft. And like I said, the draft guide is coming out soon. We will have our rankings up before that, though. So check out McKeen's.com, McKeensHockey.com for all our content. And guys, thanks a lot for doing this. A lot of fun as always. Hey, you know what? It's fun just talking mocks and talking hockey, especially this time of the year, right before the draft. 3 weeks left or so for the draft, and it's going to be a blast. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much for having me on. It's good to be
Thanks, Mark.
on the other side of the not hosting.